important point here is they don't just hit schizophrenics. They hit us all. And they hit us all with thoughts like that. You're no good. You're stupid. You're not good enough. Nobody likes you. Nobody loves you. Nobody will ever love you. You're going to fail. You're ugly. You're stupid. All those kind of thoughts. All of those come from the dark side. They're not inherent in the spiritual being which you are. So what all of those thoughts do is generate negative emotional energy. And that's what these things feed off of. That's what they're after. That's why they're inserting these negative thoughts in there. They're not just doing it for fun. They're doing it for food. And for probably more than a decade, I noticed that the schizophrenics that I worked with in the institutions, after the voices attacked them, they would be completely drained. Some of them were so drained they couldn't even get out of bed to eat breakfast in the morning. And some of them actually said that they could feel their energy leaving when these voices were attacking them. They could actually feel their energy being sucked out of them. And I didn't know what that was. What I noticed is if I worked with any more than 2 of them a day, that I would come home and I was so drained I couldn't get anything else done at home. I just would plop down on the sofa and I'd be drained. So I would limit the number of them I would work with in a day, even though I found them fascinating. After a while, I really trying to figure out what was going on with them was driving me nuts. It was like, this doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. Why do they keep going off their medications and going crazy? Why do they do these stupid things? And what are the voices? And why are they telling them these things? But any attempt to study the voices when psychiatry was around. I mean, there's twice where I've been hauled up in front of the medical director and told the voices are hallucinations. You will not ask patients about these voices. They're hallucinations. That's what they are. And all you're doing is making the patient worse by asking them questions about what they are and what they're being told. You're reinforcing the hallucinations. And I knew that wasn't true. But boy, they were putting the clamp on it. They don't want anybody studying what these voices are and bringing out the truth. They want to keep the same narrative that they have that is making them a fortune selling these drugs and having people believe that the only treatment for schizophrenia is their toxic drugs. And then when these awful side effects start appearing, what they do is they pile more drugs on top of it, like cogentin, to mask those negative side effects. So when those neurological symptoms of damage start appearing, they then mask those also, so that the damage continues to go on, but the patient isn't experiencing it because it's masked by these other drugs. And I've never seen a psychiatrist sit down with a patient and explain to them all the side effects that these drugs can have and how dangerous they actually are. They don't do that. I've never seen one in my entire career sit down and explain how dangerous these drugs can be. They just say, well, you got to be on them for the rest of your life because that's the way it is. There is no cure. You got to take them. You got to come back and see me once a month or something to make sure your medications are adjusted right. Look at the hopeless message that they're giving these patients. Here they come in there. They don't know what's going on. Something's wrong with their minds. They don't know what it is. They don't know what to do about it. They go to a psychiatrist. He tells them their brains are broken. There is no cure. They have to keep coming back for these awful medications for the rest of their life. And the cost is astronomical. So they're like, whoa, that's like Dante's Inferno, where above the gate is like, all those who walk through these gates leave any hope behind. So it's a very debilitating, depressive message. Brainwashed to believe that these voices are hallucinations, and that's what they believe. And they're not allowed to look into them. Any psychiatrist who publishes a paper that counters what establishment is saying is not going to get that paper published and is going to be blown off. They're going to face repercussions. The only reason I could come out with this stuff is that I'm retired and they can't get their hands on me anymore. Otherwise, I would have been fired. So what the schizophrenic is faced with is they're hearing these voices that are appearing in their minds that they're carrying on conversations with and arguing with. That are telling them to do things that are unacceptable. And they've been told, like everybody else, that all thoughts that appear in your mind belong to you. So in their gut, they're feeling like, well, this can't be me, but who else can it be? So that one of the first things they're faced with is trying to figure out what these invasive voices are and how they operate and what they should do about them. So they go to the psychiatrist, they get that very debilitating, depressive message. And those who believe what the psychiatrist said are the ones that are least likely to recover fully from schizophrenia. If they buy that hook, line, and sinker, they're least likely to recover. They're more likely to commit suicide. They're more likely to suffer neurological damage. Then there's a second group that don't fully believe what the psychiatrists say, but can't believe that the voices, which they experience as very real, are not something else, and they're struggling to try to find out, well, are these my thoughts, or are these the thoughts of somebody else, or is psychiatry right? So they're in this limbo state. They're not quite sure what's going on. And what they decide as to what the voices are will predict their probability of recovering fully from schizophrenia. If they buy into what psychiatry says, that this is a permanent, neurological thing, their brains are broken, which there is no proof. I mean, there is no proof for what psychiatry is saying, none. Their brains aren't broken, there are no genetic markers, they've never, and they keep perpetuating these lies because it sells drugs. So if they believe what psychiatry said, their chances of committing suicide and never recovering are much higher than a third group who realizes that the voices are not who they are, that they're invasive entities of some kind, that their intention does not match their intention. The voices' intentions don't match their intention. Like when you get a intrusive negative thought commanding you to do something that you don't want to do, that's not your intention, and you're not going to do it. Well, so do these guys. So they've come to the conclusion that these voices are not who they are. They're something else, even though they might not know exactly what they are. They know that they're not them. So there's a psychological distance between the voices and who they view themselves to be. Now, when any of these groups ask the voices themselves, who are you? The voices will respond, we are you. So the voices want them to believe that those thoughts are their thoughts, that they're not from a foreign entity, that all thoughts that enter your mind belong to you. So what they do then is they start inserting these negative intrusive thoughts that are very upsetting to the patient. And when the patient goes to fight it or resist it, there's an awful lot of negative emotional energy generated. And these entities then suck that energy off. So basically what the voices are doing to schizophrenics and the rest of us are the same things we do to cattle, dairy cattle, is they set them out in the field, they eat grass, they produce milk, the farmer brings them in, isolates them, milks them, takes the milk, and then sets them out to pasture again to eat more grass and then milks them again. So that's what these things are doing to us. So they insert negative, upsetting, intrusive thoughts into your mind, your thought stream, and they take that upset and they drain off the negative emotional energy that is produced. And that's their food. That's what they feed off of. They could give a damn about us as beings, as humans. What they want is that energy. And they can't eat negative or positive energy. It has to be negative emotional energy. They can't produce their own energy. They have to get it from somewhere else. So they're parasites. So they're just like a leech. If you saw a leech on you, you wouldn't just sit there and go, oh, that's a hallucination, and you wouldn't leave it there. You would try to get rid of it. So the schizophrenics who realize that these voices are parasitic entities, that's the last thing the voices want them to realize. And that in clinical situations, when you're about to tell the patient that, and at some point they need to know that, the voices go nuts. So if you're going to get a negative explosive reaction from a schizophrenic patient, it would be when you try to tell them that the voices are parasites, because that's the last thing the voices want them to understand. They want them to think that the voices are them. That's who they are. So it's a battle for the mind. These voices are like a mind virus. And when psychiatry is telling me, oh, they're hallucinations, it's like, yeah, there's hallucinations and there's nothing you can do about them other than take our toxic medications. That's their message. But there's a lot you can do about those voices. There's a lot of different ways to block them and circumvent them and short circuit them and to fight them and drive them off. Question, because it's a question I had when I was studying the voices also. They can start both ways. Now, where they originate is two ways. Two major ways that schizophrenia is initiated. One is by severe emotional, sexual, or physical abuse. People who are severely abused in those ways are much more likely to start experiencing schizophrenic symptoms and voices than others.
So could the mind control programs like MK Ultra, the Monarch Project, be there to induce schizophrenia on a massive scale? And could even events like 9/11 that are extremely traumatic, or the COVID that are extremely traumatic, could they be events that are staged by those entities or governments controlled by those entities to create?
No, I believe so. I believe so. 9/11 and even this COVID garbage that they're doing now. They concoct all this stuff. They carry it out. It terrorizes the people. When the people are scared, they clamp onto anything that they think will save them. And then the government goes, oh, come to us, come to us. Yeah. So, yeah, I think right now all this COVID stuff is thoughts put out by the dark side. 9/11 was carried out by entity-possessed government officials and the CIA and the U.S. government, to start a war. So the plan right now, we're in a huge spiritual battle right now between good and evil. And evil's being exposed like never before. So the second major way that schizophrenia is brought on is by meth, amphetamine. I working in the prison, there were so many prisoners who were using meth and end up committing crimes or killing somebody. So the prisoners called meth the devil's drug. And it does something to open up the spiritual protection people have and allows the invasion by these entities. And the way it might start off, it may start off just like you said, very sudden. All of a sudden at the age of 25 or so, these voices start appearing in their mind. Telling them to do rotten things, telling them they're no good, they're rotten, they're stupid, and just plaguing them with that kind of stuff, or compulsive thoughts, or depressive thoughts. But they're all thoughts, and thoughts are not who you are. So that's one of the big things where psychiatry and psychology are way off base. They're still thinking that all thoughts belong to the person. They're not aware that thoughts are energetic entities. The voices aren't physical. So they can follow a schizophrenic patient all over the world. There's nothing that blocks them physically or mentally from doing that. And until psychiatry realizes that it is the schizophrenic voices that drive schizophrenia. It's the schizophrenic voices that drive abnormal behavior in schizophrenics. It's not any kind of broken brain that they can medicate, but they're just clutching at straws to keep their discipline going. And in order to do that, they have to convince the population that their brains are broken, that schizophrenic brains are broken, or that there's something wrong with your brain because you're depressed, or there's something wrong with your brain because you're compulsive, or something wrong with your brain because you're bipolar, or something wrong with your brain. It's all blame the brain, blame the brain, blame the brain. But they know that schizophrenia is a thought disorder, but that's where they drop the ball. They have never studied the disordered thoughts of schizophrenics, and they're pushing the brain because they can drug the brain. The brain is like a radio receiver. You turn it to a certain frequency, and the thoughts come in. Just like you turn the radio to a different channel to play music, and different kinds of music come in. The schizophrenics are stuck at a low frequency, and no matter what psychology and psychiatry say, they have never found a thought inside the brain And to say that the brain, the thoughts, the brain is broken because the thoughts are playing at a certain frequency is like saying that to a radio receiver is digging inside the radio receiver to try to find the person whose voice is coming out of it. It's the same thing. They're not going to find where those thoughts are coming from. They've never found a thought in the brain. They've never done an autopsy of the brain and seen a thought in there, because these are not of this universe. They're not of the physical universe. So they've just blown off the whole thing with disruptive thoughts or what the voices are or how to deal with them. And they just go, well, the only way to deal with them is our expensive toxic drugs. Like I said, there's a huge battle between good and evil going on this planet right now, and evil has ruled this planet for thousands of years. But now it's being exposed at a level like it's never been before. And yeah, I think the drug companies are complicit in this. China is complicit in this. I hear they found a freighter off the coast of the U.S. that was loaded with enough fentanyl to kill everybody in North and South America, coming from the Chinese. The Chinese are selling the Mexican cartel drugs to produce meth. So we're in a war and we're under attack right now, and so are you.
Yeah,
we all are.
In Europe, definitely.
Spread information, fund legal groups, because these people are trying to kill us. I have no doubt that the higher ups in this are eaten up by these negative entities that I'm talking about in schizophrenia. These people are psychopaths.
One of the factors behind illnesses are the presence of what he calls Ahrimanic Luciferian entities in different organs, and the way they're positioned, the way they affect the organ will cause them different types of illnesses. Now, up from the scratches, that those entities can affect the physical body at one level or another.
They can, but a large number of schizophrenics are physically okay. They're not mentally okay. These things attack into dreams too. They attack through nightmares. So they come through in dreams, and some of the most dastardly ones where they would tell the patient, you're going to die of cancer in a year. And if the patient believes that, then they get cancer in a year. So yeah, your mind can make you sick. And if these voices are constantly telling you, yeah, you're going to die of this or you're going to die of that, you create it. The human spirit creates things. And when it believes that something is true, it'll create it.
Yeah, that's true. And there's And
until they wake up to the fact that these are entities, that the voices are real entities, they're never going to find a cure for schizophrenia, because it's the voices that drive paranoid schizophrenia. They're the driving force behind it. It's the voices that tell the schizophrenic who they are, what they are, and what they're going to do. And everybody's seen crazy people kill a bunch of people out on the streets. These mass murders and mass shootings are usually done by people that are eaten up with voices. So one of the things the voices do, the schizophrenics do, is they run fixed set patterns, and these patterns don't waver. And one of the first patterns, and you can look at this at yourself, and you can see these in yourself. I mean, in everybody, but with schizophrenics, these things are almost fixed patterns. First of all, they're always negative. So the most common and consistent trait of schizophrenic voices is that they're consistently negative, derogatory, insulting, abusive, and destructive. And they're liars. You can't believe anything they say. You can't trust them to do anything they say they're going to do. One patient was told by his voices that if he poked his eye out, if he gouged his eye out, the voices would disappear and they wouldn't come back. So he gouged his eye out. The voices came back and said, "Well, look at what a fool you are. You listen to us. Look how stupid you are. You think we're going to, tell you the truth?" No, So here he was he defaced himself for the rest of his life, and the voices are just hounding him even worse. So they're very malicious, And they may start off as a lot of times they know stuff that the patient himself doesn't know, and they use that to prove that they are some kind of god or something. They have some kind of special power. But if the patient buys into that, they'll slowly start turning on them. They might, especially with drug addicts. I don't know how many I've had tell me in the prison that when they ran out of meth, the voices would tell them where to be and what time to be there for to get more meth, and they'd show up at that spot, and somebody would show up with the drug, over and over and over again. So they thought that was great because they were out of drugs, and here's the voices helping them get the drugs, but the drugs are killing them.
Well, that really rings true to me, because in my research, in my work, I've spoken to a lot of people who practice channeling. Channeling is basically mediumship and all that. Now, some of them are genuinely in contact with either dead people or with beings of light, but they're a minority. Most of them are in contact with beings who, in my opinion, masquerade as beings of light. And how do you notice it? Well, you just have to look at the life of those channelers. Most of them are divorced, separated, they're completely isolated. Most of them have very serious health problems, including cancer, obesity, diabetes, whatever. And a lot of them are just in such a state, they're almost drained of all their energy. And I'm sure of it now that it's those beings that masquerade as beings of light, ascended masters, dead people, to get the energy of the channeler. And I think